Have too much cut off. That's not good. Okay, get that started again. Ooh, looking good. I want to get rid of this. I will clip that just a little bit. This is not going to show. This will be under the front. Kind of relieve that so it'll lay down. And coming on around with it. It's good. Strong hands is a good asset to wrapping a horn. We've got a wrinkle right there. Oh, string got left under there. I had one student one time that, man, he didn't have no trouble. He just get a hold of an old piece of leather and pull it around there and make it fit, boy. He had strength in his hands. We'll tack that down. Whoops. That one got started wrong. Okay. I usually get a hammer handle or whatever's handy to kind of rub this. Just to kind of encourage the wrinkles not to come up. Okay, that's looking good. Now the next, I've got a little bit of a pocket right there. Well, I'll have to get rid of it when I put the glue on. Those, see how right in here, that fills up all of that crack right in there, all that corner. The next step will be to stitch it. I usually stitch it while I'm waiting on the wrap to dry. And to get a stitching line, I find the center and mark, see how close I got to. That's back down a little bit for that. Okay, right there's your center, and then I check and make sure that I put my fingernail there and look down here and see if it corresponds with the horn down there, and it does. Check over here, it does. Check sideways, check the front, and it does. So we're in good shape right there. And what I do, I anchor it here in the center, make sure it doesn't slip, and just drag it. Now I'm just creasing it, I'm not cutting it. I'm just creasing me a heavy line, and that is going to be my stitch line. I don't groove on the horn. In fact, I don't groove hardly anything. I'd rather crease it and follow that crease than a groove. Okay, I've got a big ugly spot right there, and I've got something I've been doing for a good while now. I've got a little flower stamp, and I put that right in the middle. And if I hit it right, which I did that time, that hole that I had there is right in the center of that little flower. If I do a full tool job, then I tool this up here and it covers it up. One bad habit I've got, I don't use a stitching wheel. I've stitched long enough that I'm pretty well tell, but sometimes I get off. So if I'm wanting to make sure that I don't get off, well, I take the dividers and bring it down to a little under 1/4 inch, and which will make it about a number 5 stitch, and just mark it around. Yeah, about right. It takes a little longer, but I don't do it on everything. But I just mark my stitches this way. Go right on around. And I don't use 2 needles. I use the lock stitch, just a 1 needle and then a lock stitch. This horn set overnight and got dry. I like for this to be wet and the underside to be wet when I stitch it, so that when I pull the stitch up, it will sink down into the leather a little bit. I use a number 348 polyester thread. I use polyester thread on the rest of my saddle. This is a little heavier than what I use on the machine. I've got about 40 inches here of thread, and that gives me plenty to have some left over. I like to have enough left over at the end down here to be able to get a hold of and pull. Our first hole, to be able to come out right on the bottom side, we're going to have to angle it just a little bit, like that. And the first stitch, I go down. Like I told you, I use a single needle and the lock stitch type of stitch, and I'll show you what that means. I've got my stitch already marked off, and again I go down and I come out right beside the horn on the bottom. I come up and we go make a loop around that first thread, so that we will end up with a loop there, and we're going to pull it down in there, and I give it just a little bit of a tug after I get it in there to kind of set it. I will say this, if you're not an experienced hand stitcher, you need to tighten your thread exactly the same way every time, or you won't have a consistent looking stitch. On my cantle binding, I will stitch it a different way. I'll pull my stitch all the way to the bottom. That loop, I'll pull it all the way to the bottom, and then I'll use this one to pull it back in there, and what I'm doing, I'm tightening up that bottom stitch, but I don't do it on the horn. If you'll notice, I'm not even looking. I get my point set where I'm going to go in, and then I look down on the bottom side, and I find, and I've taught this by old saddle makers, if you'll look where you're wanting it to come out after some practice, you'll be able to hit that. you'll be able to come out where you want to. And that may sound crazy, but it works. Takes a little practice, but it works. So we're going to stitch this old horn up. Sometimes I have more trouble finding where to put the needle in than I do finding where the awl is supposed to come out on the bottom. Okay, I've got 4 or 5 stitches there. After I get my stitching about halfway around, then I take the bars and kind of stick them in between these 2x6s here on my drawdown. Kind of stick them in there like that, and that puts the horn up eye level, and just a little easier for me to stitch it that way. I don't have to bend over so much. Now I've got it up at eye level, or almost, and I can stitch a little bit easier without having to bend over so much to see the bottom side. And the less you have to strain and move around, the neater work you can do, because when you get in a strain, where you're going to end up messing up a little bit. See, my stitches are pretty even. I'm talking about the way they're drawn down. You don't see one sticking up a little bit further than the other, or the other one buried down. They're pretty even, and that comes from pulling the same way and about the same tension each time. Okay, we're down to our last 2 stitches now, and it's important to make that last stitch, even if you have to make this last stitch a little shorter or a little longer, whatever it takes, it needs to be down close to this cut. If you stop your stitching up here, then it's a possibility for this to get raised up or get frayed and start looking ugly. So you need to stitch it right down as close as you can to the edge of that leather right there at that cut. So we're going to take the last 2 stitches in this thing. And when we get down to this last stitch, I don't do it any different than I have been doing the rest of them. I don't double knot it or anything. I just go ahead and do it just like I've been doing these others. I've double knotted, and I have tied off on the bottom, and I've done a little bit of everything that I thought I had to do. But this stitch is just like a sewing machine stitch, and you can run a sewing machine right up to there and stop and cut it off, and it will stay because it's got a lock. That thread is locked on the inside. So okay, I've got my dividers, and I'm going back to that center spot, and I want to set it just about 1/8 of an inch outside the stitching, and I'm going to draw me a line around, and that line is my cutting line. Now I hope that you can see this. I think you can see this line right here. It's coming out down here, but then we need to trim this across here. So I usually start here and then kind of blend that in like that. And I use a head knife, and you can use whatever you like the best, but I got started using a head knife, cutting these off, and it just seems easier to me, but there is some hazard, so I'll show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to start on this side. It's just easier for me to go that route than it is to come on this side. But see the tip of my knife? I want to get that ahead of this horn. I don't want it back here, because if it's back here you could take a chance on nicking your horn. So get that point out ahead of you and come, and this blade is at about a 10-degree angle compared to this surface here. I want my horn to slope off like that, about maybe somewhere between 10 and 15-degree angle. You can adjust it however you would prefer. So we're going to get started. Just take it slow, don't get no hurry. Now I don't push with my hand